I think for many fans in their 20s and younger, Arsène Wenger is the only manager they've ever known at Arsenal. Without Googling, many would be hard-pressed to tell you who was at the helm before him. Psst, it was Bruce Ryan. Similarly, a lot of us are guilty of taking Arsène for granted. Though the, shall we say, awkward last few years are what stick out the most.
I've had enough of you, Wenger, blood. Yeah? I've had enough of you, blood.
He is responsible for completely changing not only Arsenal Football Club, but modern English football, if not football in general, as we know it. Hey there, I'm Adrian and welcome to Rabona TV. In this video, we'll be taking an in-depth look at the background of Arsène Wenger, from his upbringing in the Alsace region of France, to his playing career, his stint as a manager in Japan, and of course, his time at Arsenal. This is part of our Player and Manager Bio series, so if you like what you see, then a subscription is always appreciated and helps the channel out. Beyond that, let's get to it. Arsène Wenger was born in Strasbourg, in the Alsace region of France, on October 22nd, 1949. The Alsace has a long history with Germany, and was of course incorporated into the Greater German Reich during World War II. During this time, men from the region were in some cases conscripted into the German army against their will, and Arsene's father, Alphonse, was no exception, as he was sent to the Eastern Front in 1944. Thankfully for the Wengers, he survived and continued to run the family-owned automotive parts business, as well as a bistro called La Croix d'Or, which he ran with his wife, Louise. Wenger spent much of his time at the bistro, given that his family lived right above it, where he observed the effects of alcohol on the patrons. This, of course, sheds light on his decisions to later impose drinking bans on his teams. However, he does attribute some of his tactical acumen to said drunks at La Croix d'Or, or at least some of his interest in tactics, as from the age of 5 and on, Wenger sat and listened to patrons heatedly discussing football. In fact, Wenger himself never had a taste of alcohol throughout his entire playing career in the lower divisions of French football. When he was 18 and playing as a midfielder for his village of Duttenheim, he was spotted by AS Mutzig, a neighboring club, and was asked to join them. He played for Mutzig for 4 years before moving on to Mulhouse, where he'd score 4 goals as a midfielder from 56 appearances. All the while, he was attending the Faculté des Sciences Économiques et de Gestion at the University of Strasbourg, where he completed a degree in economics. From there, he had a stint playing for Strasbourg, but rarely made first-team appearances, including in the season that Strasbourg won the Ligue 1. It's also important to note that in his last 2 seasons with Strasbourg, he spent most of his time managing the reserve and youth teams. Throughout his playing career, however, his coaches recognized that despite not being the captain, he was the player who would organize his team and tell players where to go and what to do. Funnily enough, the first foreign football match that he viewed was when he was 12 years old, as he saw Tottenham, of all teams, win the 1961 FA Cup. But before he would move to manage their rivals, before he would go to Japan, before he would manage in Monaco or AS Nancy, Arsène Wenger was an assistant coach at AS Caen. However, after just 1 year, Aldo Platini, yes, the father of Michel Platini, offered Wenger the head coach position at AS Nancy, and in his first match, the lowly side went away to PSG and beat them 4-2. While he didn't have much glory with Nancy, with the team even getting relegated in his final season, he did enough to catch the eye of AS Monaco and signed with them in 1987. In his debut season, Monaco won the league, and in 1991, they won the Coupe de France. However, as far as major silverware goes, that was it in Monaco. Despite this, Bayern Munich was keen to sign him as their next manager in 1994, though Monaco didn't permit him to leave. It must have been a frustrating sequence of events for Wenger, as after a slow start to the 94-95 season, he was sacked. As a member of the FIFA Technical Committee, Wenger had connections around the world, and one of those was with the ownership of Nagoya Grampus 8, a J-League or Japanese League side owned by Toyota. Wenger flew to Japan to watch the team play their final match of the season, which was in fact Gary Lineker's final match of his career, and Wenger was handed a managing contract days later. Nagoya had finished bottom of the league the season before Wenger arrived, and their form continued to falter in his first season. However, this led to a change in his managerial ways. Instead of methodically pinpointing every move he wanted his players to make during their winter break in Versailles, he began to impose a more free-thinking philosophy. Dragan Stojkovic recalls him screaming things like, "Don't look at me to ask me what to do with the ball," and "Decide for yourself, why don't you think it out?" And the effects were felt immediately. After the break, Nagoya won 17 of their 27 fixtures in 1995, finishing as runners-up in the league. Then, in 1996, they defeated Sanfrecce Hiroshima in the Emperor's Cup, their first trophy. In the Super Cup, they beat the Yokohama Marinos 2-0. His final match with Nagoya was in August of 1996, in which he announced to the crowd that he was leaving to join Arsenal.
Watashi wa itsuma demo Nagoya o aishite imasu. Thank you very much.
The move had been in the works for a while, and he officially took over on October 1st, 1996. During his time with Nagoya, David Dean, the vice chairman of Arsenal at the time, had heard of this French manager in Japan and was curious. So curious, in fact, that he would send footage of Arsenal matches to Wenger to hear his thoughts on their play and tactics as a, quote, personal pundit. He also heard of the emphasis Arsène put on nutrition and isometrics. The former he had picked up from his time under Paul France at Mulhouse. These two things completely changed football. First, the nutrition. While in Japan, Arsène said that he was amazed at how the Japanese ate. Quote, "The whole way of life there is linked to health. Their diet is basically boiled vegetables, fish, and rice. No fat, no sugar. You notice when you live there that there are no fat people. I think in England you eat too much sugar and meat and not enough vegetables." The Arsenal players were forced to change their diets, eating fish and boiled chicken instead of red meats. Junk food was strongly discouraged, and he enlisted pasta as the pre-match meal. Nowadays, all of these nutritional practices are commonplace in the game. And the isometrics? Think of working out without moving your joints. Stretching and using resistance in order to build muscle and flexibility. On top of the change in diet and the added stretching that was imposed upon the players, Wenger also brought in an osteopath and massage therapist to the medical team. Unheard of in the 90s. Plus, Arsène was given control over contract negotiations, hands-on training sessions, and transfers, unprecedented for a manager at that time. It wasn't an easy transition. Arsenal's captain Tony Adams said, quote, "At first I thought, what does this Frenchman know about football? He wears glasses and looks more like a schoolteacher. He's not going to be as good as George Graham. Does he even speak English properly?" Adams, who battled alcoholism himself, and his teammates wouldn't have been happy with Arsène trying to control the players' drinking as well. While Arsène didn't ban drinking altogether when he first arrived, he didn't allow it in the players' lounge, where it had been quite prevalent before. Nor did he allow it on days off. Instead, it was all vitamin injections, clean eating, and creatine in their cornflakes. To say that the players were skeptical of his approach at the beginning of his tenure would be an understatement, as mentioned by Adams earlier. However, his willingness to listen to their suggestions and their concerns humanized the French manager, and the unified squad began to instill itself as one of the top teams. However, in his first season, they would finish third on goal difference, thus missing out on the Champions League. With the majority of a season under his belt, with players getting used to the lifestyle and training regime, Arsenal had something to prove in the 1997-1998 season. Another hallmark of the early days of his coaching career was his knowledge of talent from abroad, due to his massive scouting network. Said scouting network brought in the likes of Emmanuel Petit for just £2.5 million, one of his former players at Monaco. And in hopes of improving their wing play, Mark Overmars was purchased from Ajax for somewhere around £5 million, while Nicolas Anelka was brought in to bolster their attack for just £500,000. Not bad. Arsenal started the season slowly, ending up in 6th place by the time Christmas had come around. Wenger called a team meeting and allowed the players to dictate the conversation and get everything out. The defenders made it clear that they needed more cover, and so the legendary partnership of Emmanuel Petit and Patrick Vieira was born. Arsenal were an afterthought at this point as far as the title race was concerned, and with 2 months left in the season, Fred Dunn, an English bookie, paid out all bets on United winning. However, Arsène wasn't finished with the league, and after defeating Wimbledon in March of 1998, Arsenal and United were on course for a potentially title-deciding meeting, a meeting which saw Arsenal win 1-0 at Old Trafford.
He's done it this time! The championship race still very much open.
From there, they won 8 consecutive matches to win the title. An 18-match undefeated run led Arsenal to their title in the 97-98 season, which was fairly impressive at the time, and hey, even is to this day. While they lost Anelka in 1999 to Real Madrid, they gained in signing Thierry Henry, adding to their crop of talented young players. By this point, Arsène had fully transitioned Arsenal from boring Arsenal, a team whose tactics were nothing more than kick and chase long ball football, into a team that played with flair and finesse while keeping the ball on the ground. And in the 2001-2002 season, they went on to win another league and FA Cup double, with the aforementioned Henry leading the team with 32 goals in all competitions. The icing on the cake.
It's Freddie Youngberg again, pushed out by Bartes, Wilson!
The 1-0 win at Old Trafford to clinch the Premier League title. Arsène Wenger considered their 2002 league title a, quote, shift of power in English football, and spoke publicly of his desire to finish a season unbeaten. Unfortunately, in the following season, Arsenal was unbeaten only until October, and the wheels fell off a bit with a second-placed finish. From 98 to 2003, Arsenal never finished lower than second, and in the 2003-2004 season, they never lost. In their historic Invincibles season, Arsenal became the first, and to this day the only club in Premier League history to finish an entire season without losing a single match. This was the apex of Wenger's league-winning powers, as Arsenal won 26 matches and drew 12. Unfortunately, just as the wheels fell off for Arsenal's 2002-2003 campaign after one loss, that's sort of representative of Arsene's Premier League performances following the dizzying heights of the Invincibles. After going from 1998 to 2003 finishing no lower than second place, Arsenal, under Wenger, would finish no higher than second place for the remainder of his tenure. That said, for a man who won 3 Premier League titles and 3 FA Cups within his first 8 years of managing the club, 4 FA Cups spread out amongst 12 years simply isn't good enough, and frankly, isn't worth elaborating on further. It's as if Arsène Wenger's reign has been divided into 2 eras. The early years, where Arsenal were playing some of the most beautiful football that the Premier League has ever seen, and then the last 12 or so years, where, well...
Manchester United 8, Arsenal 2.
He's a f***ing fraud, blood.
Oh, confusion at Martin!
He's finished. He was a great manager. He's gone. He's gone.
An embarrassment for Arsenal and Arsène Wenger.
Arsène Wenger, we want you to go.
But for me, and to be honest, perhaps it helps that I'm not an Arsenal fan, I'll always remember him for how he elevated the game in England, not only for revolutionizing how players prepare for matches with their diet and self-care, or changing the identity of a club from lager and chips football to the fast, incisive, artistic football that became Arsenal's identity, or how he revolutionized scouting systems within the English league to bring in younger talents at a cheaper price thanks to his knowledge of foreign markets, namely the French market. But perhaps paramount to that was simply his arrival in England, as in a roundabout way, it helped to elevate the league to the level it's at now. In the first 5 seasons of the Premier League, Manchester United won the title 4 times, with Blackburn being the only outlier in that time frame. Once Wenger arrived, whom Sir Alex didn't warm to from the outset.
He doesn't know anything about English football. He's at, well, the use of a big club, Arsenal. I think he can concentrate on his own job.
Arsenal and Manchester United traded titles back and forth, traded blows on the pitch, all the while their managers traded them off of it. Wenger and Ferguson forced each other to always improve, to always raise the bar, similarly to how Ronaldo and Messi have done so for each other. Before Mourinho versus Benitez, or Mourinho versus Wenger, or Mourinho versus anyone really, there is Wenger versus Ferguson, the original Premier League managerial rivalry, from which Sir Alex Ferguson can thank Wenger not for his success, for that's entirely down to his own ability as a manager, of course, but he can thank him for bringing a consistent challenger to a dominant United side that was desperately in need of one from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. So what has he won as far as silverware? A Ligue 1 title, a Coupe de France, an Emperor's Cup, 3 Premier League titles, and 7 FA Cup titles. Sorry, I'm not going to count Community Shields and Super Cups here. A decent haul of 13 trophies, which by no means puts him even in the top 10 most successful managers of all time. However, I hope this video helps you realize that he did much more for the game than just win titles. He was the definition of ahead of his time. He helped the English Premier League to become the juggernaut it is today, and he contributed to the change in the way football clubs are run, if not just in England, then around the world. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then don't be afraid to drop a like, and hey, maybe even subscribe if you're feeling extra generous. My name is Adrian, this is Rabona TV, and thanks for watching.